There you go, Beth.
All right, we got it.
Yay.
I did it. All right. So we're going to talk today about things to consider and perhaps work on if you are someone who's wanting to make some improvements to your book. So I call it from good to great because when I took over, I was taking over a program that was kind of fledgling, and they basically did a scrapbook book, and there were just a couple of kids who actually did anything for the book, and I wanted it to be something that the school could be proud of. And so over the years, I've just tried to improve practices and the book itself. So we're going to talk about just some things that I learned from that. Now it won't move. Why is it not moving? There we go. Okay, so I broke it down into 3 categories. So content, we're going to talk a little bit about theme development and coverage in community in terms of commitment and rapport among the staff members, and then also accountability with setting some goals and also doing some reflection among the staff. So in terms of the design, I mean, obviously the look of the book is something that's going to be really important. So, that kind of starts with the theme and the design of the book, because those two go so hand in hand. So for us, Yearbook has become kind of a year-long task for us, because we try to plan as much as possible from the time the previous book is finished to when school restarts. So that can be anything from, the graphics, the colors, the tagline, the photo packaging, the mods, headlines, the ACD. So really, we try to plan as much, get as much kind of nailed down before school starts, so that when school starts, it's more about the collection of the stories and the photos, and we're not having to make those decisions about how things are going to look, because that tends to just make things more difficult. I've also found that it makes more mistakes happen, because if you're 2 months in trying to figure out, well, this is the way our headlines are going to look, then you've got to make sure you've gone back and made all those changes to those previous ones. So the more that you can kind of front load those decisions, the easier it becomes later on down the road. So I just plopped in a previous book of ours from 2015 because there were a lot of kind of pieces to the theme package that we tried to kind of work through. And all of this would have been planned in the summer. So we did the students would do mock theme presentations in kind of April, May of the school year. And then we would take our kind of top 2 or 3 ideas, and we would go to camp in the summer and kind of flesh those ideas out. And then we would also then, after camp, with whatever number of weeks were left, we would meet 1 or 2 days a week at the school to talk about stories that they had found over the summer, or additional ideas that they had kind of fleshed out. And then I always, not this year obviously, but I ran a summer boot camp for a week before school started, and it was voluntary. The students could come if they wanted to. They did not have to. There certainly was no penalty, and they could literally come for 3 hours, or they could come for 6. So I ran it from 9 to 3, and it was an opportunity for them to continue working, to practice their photo skills, to get to know each other, and really get the ball rolling on some of those things. So in terms of just the example that I have in here, I mean, obviously you can see the font choice, you can see the 5 boxes. It's hard to tell, but there's a 1-point color stroke around each of those photos, and we color coded the different types of content in the book. So you'll see that as we go through. And then, it's if you only knew, so it was all about details for different students, different groups, different events. So what the students did is, you'll see the 5 boxes at the top. And so they used those and the colors to kind of represent the type of content that was going to be on there. So they use that color throughout. Of course, you see the bars going through, you know, the close, tight photo packaging in there, going through as well. And then certainly, you know, beyond some of that, they really tried to be smart about how they told their stories. So they chose to do an if they only knew. So students talk about what they know about Matt, and you know, of course, Matt didn't know anything about it. You know, it was kind of a feel good sort of mod, you know, look inside the classroom. So really, in terms of that, we kind of take the list of all of the different options that they have, whether it be from just kind of the generic list of 50 ways to tell a story, or that they've looked through magazines and have found kind of visual or kind of storytelling ideas, and then we match them up. Like once we kind of know the tagline, you sort of match that up and really tell the stories that match the type of book with the tone that you're trying to, you know, present. You know, a couple other examples, you know, they chose to do some game stats with that mod because it was all about the details with that. And then they did kind of an all-inclusive device where it just kind of facts about different people to get as many kids in as possible, which of course everybody is trying to do. They also tried to play with some of the headlines, and you know, the more you can kind of package things together and make them all fit, you know, obviously the more cohesive, the stronger the overall look and the overall impression of that book is going to be. So then, of course, they, across the top where you saw those vectors on the divider, just did kind of small stories with some photos and some quotes from students, or, you know, survey answers, depending on where they were. And that was really a way that they did a really good job of getting all the kids in the book. I think our coverage that year was that like 98% of the kids were in at least 2 times, because they were smart about how they included that extra content with the ACD. So obviously, you know, that takes planning, that takes some time, that takes some organization, and so that's kind of where kind of the coverage plan comes in a little bit. So in order to really manage that, I've always used a coverage editor, someone whose job it is simply to manage the coverage, and that way they can you know, make sure that we are covering all the content, all the sports, all the academics, all the clubs, but also they can kind of help when they're looking at the page to make sure we've got a balance of boys to girls on the page, that we've got a balance of you know, age ranges. If it's a spread that could be, you know, 9 through 12, we shouldn't only have 12th graders on that spread. You know, their job is kind of those fine-tuning details. And then certainly networking, the content planning, photography, and spread signatures are going to be part of that as well. So for the coverage editor, they are going to track every week. So whatever, you know, system you have, whether it's posting on a bulletin board the names of all the students, and you highlight them in yellow the first time they're used, and then you highlight them in blue the second time, and then you know the kids that are green are all done, right? Or you've got a binder, you know, whatever system you use, that person is always tracking every week, right? They're tracking what types of content's in there, they're tracking who is in there, and they're communicating with the different groups, you know, as they're working on their spreads to make sure they're aware of you know, what they're doing. So I tend to have more girls on my staff than boys, and so we end up seeing sometimes, you know, trends where you know, all the big dominant photos on a divider are of boys. And, you know, that's a problem because it's not just about the boys. So, you know, we have that coverage editor whose job it is to really kind of look big picture and figure that out. So they also are going to meet with that production team, as I said, And they are going to have access to, any of the Google Drives to look at the interviews that they have. Because if they notice that there's an imbalance, they can look in that folder and see, well, you did an interview with this other person. They're in 10th grade. You don't have any 10th graders. How about we swap that out in there? So it's kind of a catch-all, because the groups that are working on the content, they've got a lot of work that they're doing already. And so that coverage editor just takes that, extra bit of work off of them, and it becomes a little bit collaborative as well. So in addition to that, certainly, we're trying to tell as many stories as possible. So I try to use all of the resources that I can. So I will periodically send out just a generic staff email, requesting suggestions. When we have our opening day meetings, or, we have faculty meetings once a month with everybody. So I will, ask the principal, hey, can I have 2 minutes, right? And I'll sometimes pass out a survey, or I'll, do a little plug, and just, ask, like, what are you doing in your classrooms? Let us know. My students also have brainstorms that they have to do each week. Sometimes I've assigned that to be, a certain club or a certain sport or something along those lines. But oftentimes it's either a question I have them answer and they've got to find some information about it, or they have to come in with 5 ideas, that type of thing. The principal, guidance counselors, they sometimes know things that we don't, so we can use that. Really, I try not to say no to people when they ask for help with things, particularly with photos, simply because I know somewhere down the road I might need help from them, or I might need access to their classroom for my kids to take photos or something like that. So, just kind of, being a good ambassador for the school, so that people kind of send that love back to you. And then also, I scour the weekly newsletter and the school announcements, and, anything that goes on Facebook for the school, because, we all have busy kids. They get most of the things, but they don't see it all. So, really trying to look at all of the different things that you can, to try to find as many as possible for that. So in terms of the, the kind of the content planning, so part of that initial planning for us is looking at the design itself of what they want. So for example, if they want spreads that have really big dominant photos, that means we have less space on the page, right? We've got to figure out, okay, so if you really like that look and that fits what you want to do, we've got to figure out how do we still get people in this book, right? And so one way that we've done it for a number of years now is to use the all-inclusive device. And sometimes they've used one, sometimes they've used 2 that look a little bit different, but the goal is that they kind of know, even before they start the content, how many kids they can get in the book with that. Like, do the math. If you're going to put 6 kids on every content page, how many content pages do you have? If you've got 1,200 kids and you're only going to put 3 kids in the ACD, you've got to figure out a way to get a lot of those kids in, right? So part of that is, the decision making of what's it going to look like? Is it going to be photos? Is it going to be quotes? Is it going to be a combination of the 2? Because really, we're trying to get as many kids in, but we're also not trying to pick an ACD that is going to be so challenging that we're not going to be able to get the other work done, right? We've got to be able to manage the workload. So we know that going into it. And sometimes if it's quote-based, we'll start the year with surveys, right? Particularly if it's in the people section, and we're going to have some survey responses, because we know those questions ahead of time. We can figure those out and then, hit the ground running without really having to do too much work with that. But again, it's all about the planning, kind of knowing going in, because if you're waiting 3 months in to figure out your ACD, you've lost all that time and possibly momentum. Okay, so in terms of photography for my students, so obviously people need to see beautiful photos, and I don't have a staff that is so big that I can designate, these 4 students are the photographers, these 4 students are the writers, and so on. So my students are required to take photos throughout the semester. So each marking period, we've got a 6-day cycle. So they have to do one event every 6-day cycle. So that comes out to be 6 or 7, because typically the first cycle, I don't count it because they're just kind of figuring things out. But within that, they have to go to at least one club event. They have to go to one sport. They have to do one academic class, and they have to do one student life event. And the student life event can be in school. It can be out of school. And my students, it's a class. So during period 4, they're working on the yearbook. If they take photos of, say, phys ed during period 4, that does not count as their as one of their events, because it's double dipping. They did it during class. That has really kind of broadened our, exposure to different things, because those kids are in different sports, are in different clubs, they know different people, and so they tend to gravitate to, things that are interesting to them. And if you've got a wide variety of students on your staff who have varied interests, they kind of cover the bases. In terms of kind of identifying those events, I have a whiteboard in my classroom that we just split into 4 I took border from bulletin board, and we just made 4 quadrants, and on a weekly basis they just list anything that's happening on there, and then kids sign up for what they want to do. So one, that helps me to know, do we have the things that we need covered if they're a must cover, and 2, do we have enough cameras to cover, because if it's pep rally day, everybody wants to take photos at pep rally. Sometimes we have to share. And then in terms of the panel photos, this was such a frustration for me when I started, and I don't know if it's true for you, but we had a photographer that was a good 40 minutes away from the school doing the senior photos, charging a sitting fee, and so we had probably 30% of the seniors not photographed, because we don't have, it's not a wealthy district. So, for kids to drive that far and then pay money just to have their senior photo in, it wasn't worth it to them. So we switched it to Live Touch. And then, they come to the school now and make it easier. But one thing that we do, which again is organization, and you have to plan it, we have 2 days that are kind of the makeup days in school if they didn't go in the summer. And I have students who are in either the auditorium or in the the auxiliary lunchroom that they use sometimes, who literally have this schedule. And if a student who has not had their photo taken, a senior, has not shown up within 15 minutes of the time frame, there's a buddy with that person who goes to their classroom and pulls them out of class to bring them down. They say, hey, you missed your photo. We'd like to take you down. We hand out passes ahead of time. We let the teachers know this is going to happen. And I'm fortunate that I work in a building that this is okay for us to do it. The teachers are gracious enough to let us do it. But it's a little bit of extra work. But we, I think, had 6 kids not in the book last year because of it. So it's worth it. We haven't pulled the trigger doing it for underclassmen yet, because that's kind of a bigger beast. And we also don't often have an accurate list of who didn't get their photo taken, which is super annoying, but another issue. But it's worked really well for the seniors. And I really feel like if we do nothing else, we've got to get all those seniors in the book. If we've got a senior who's not in the book, there better be a good reason for it. They better be, a student who's taking college classes and isn't in school, or moved away in October. You know what I mean? So, really the start of that is getting as many seniors in the book as possible.
Beth, I have a question for you. I'm curious. How many students do you have in a typical classroom? What's your size like? What do you
just like a regular?
Yeah.
I mean, it can range from 15 to 35.
Okay.
Depends on the level. Usually, the lower levels have fewer students.
Right.
The upper levels tend to be filled a little bit more.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one thing that we started a couple years ago, which really came out of a frustration of mine, was having them get spread signatures. So part of their kind of proofing week assignment was that they had to take the printout of the spread and go and show the spread with the quote that they're printing to all the people on that page, and get their signature saying, yes, that is what I said. And that came out of a situation where a couple years ago, I had a student who was quoted in an ACD and then actually joined staff in the spring and said, yeah, I didn't say that. And so then I freaked out. And I said, okay, well, now I can't trust you. So we did this. So listen, it does take more time. But in that proofing week, they don't really have a lot to do. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But the amazing thing that I didn't even expect to happen is that students got to then see the book, not the whole thing, right? They got to see a spread, right? But then they knew they were in it. And when students know they're in the book, they're more likely to buy the book. And those kids who are sort of the quieter students who might be, not quite as popular, when they see themselves in the book, it is like the best day for them. And so, we've had a number of students say, oh my, I'm in the book. That's amazing, and then of course they buy a book. So one, it gives me peace of mind that, we're actually printing what we're supposed to be printing and my kids aren't cutting corners. And two, we're selling more books. So I feel like it's a win-win, even though I really shouldn't have to have them do it. I do. So, so that kind of covers the content piece. So the next piece is kind of the community piece and the kind of how do you get the kids to do what they need to do kind of thing. So I kind of broke this down into time, excellence, and organization. Some of these I've touched on a little bit already. In terms of the extending the yearbook cycle to the entire year, I talked about that already. But in terms of my class, and a lot of the grading for my class comes from a weekly time sheet that the students fill out. And I did it on paper and I've done it as a Google form. My students preferred the paper version rather than the Google form. I don't know, it might depend on your students, but essentially they're required to commit 480 minutes per week. So we have an 80-minute class period because we're on a block schedule every day, right? So the time they're in class counts in that 480 minutes. So then when the extra 180 minutes in there, that comes from 3 additional hours that they have to put in. And that could be that they wrote captions at home. That could be that they worked on a spread at home. That could be that they went to the football game on Friday night and took photos for 3 hours, right? So they have to then kind of include that on their sheet. And I tell them, listen, that's on you. I don't know what you're doing. You've got to put it on there. If you forget to put it on there, I can't give you points. You got to be responsible. And, people have asked, well, what if they're lying? Listen, I don't have time for that nonsense. I don't have time to be seeking out to figure out who's lying. I got to trust them, right? And really, if they're getting their work done, I don't care that much. I really don't. I do check sometimes, like if they say they were at an event 4 hours, I'll look at the photo timestamps and I'll say, no, you weren't. And then I'll just dock them points. It's not a thing. It's fine. But no one's ever been like, Ms. Brown, you only gave me 5 points for that. I should have gotten 6. They don't do that. It's fine. But they can also get extra credit for that. So if they do 5 hours 1 week, because maybe they took a lot of photos, then they get those extra points. So, I say to kids who maybe are in sports and things and aren't as available, listen, if you can't do something 1 week, who cares, right? Maybe the next week you can do more. It all comes out in the wash. All the points go in the same way. So just, do a little bit of extra down the road. And really, I really feel like if you don't have an A in your book, what are you doing? I don't even know. Maybe a B if you're really, really busy, okay? Because it's made to be, a workshop that you can manage. Anyway, so I just by nature am a very competitive person. So I kind of, I don't expect my kids to be competitive, but I sort of present myself in that way. And so a couple years ago, GMC did their Like a Pro commercial. So every year I try to find like a song that's popular or an advertisement and use it as kind of like our theme for the year. And so I really liked the Like a Pro commercials because it really kind of fit into what we were doing, you know, because I say to the kids, like, all right, well, that's good. But could we go back? Could we get a better interview? Could we go to another football game? Can we get better photos? Because I don't want them to settle. I want them to recognize that, good is okay, but if you can be amazing, be amazing. And so kind of that just sort of fit into that. And, sometimes I'll kind of start the class with a little, reminder of it if I feel like they're, their motivation or things are slipping. But I think it's important sometimes to kind of remind them, because when we get into the thick of it, it's stressful. And, we get kind of bogged down with the work and we forget, some of the more kind of big picture things in terms of, what we're trying to get out of working on the yearbook. So beyond that, obviously organization, pretty important. I've talked about that quite a bit. But my students are put into teams. And so they have a 5-week workflow when they're in their teams. So week 1 is planning, and that week they are talking to people, looking at calendars, looking at schedules, also looking at the coverage that's already been done for different groups. And that could be, have we told a story for the JV football team? That could be, do we already have photos of these kids? If so, don't photograph those kids, right? So, it's kind of looking at that. Part of it is, who are you getting for all 4 grades? How are you getting boys? How are you getting girls? All of those things. And then week 2 is coverage. So that's the week that is actually happening. And for past couple of years, we've done a chronological book. So that coverage week is really important to try to get as much as possible. Because on that planning sheet, they'll have probably, 10 or 12 things of content that they could cover. There's no way they're going to all fit on the spread, but I want them to at least collect content for that, because what if you only plan for 4 things and then somebody doesn't show up to take photos? Then you're screwed, right? So, coverage, they're doing that, and it's their job in coverage to make sure that those photo events that need to be taken care of are covered, right? So if they look at that board and nobody signed up for the girls' soccer game and it's against Central, their rival, they better make sure someone's there, and it's their job to kind of figure out how we arrange that.
Hey, Andrew asked a question. How many students do you have in your yearbook group?
It depends. This past year I had 9 and then 6. Because I have a block schedule, so I have 2 different groups. Usually it's about 12 to 15 per semester. This past year was just a little bit lighter. So groups are typically 3 people. I don't like a group of 4 because I feel like there's always a dud in a group of 4. I like a group of 3 because then I've got one person who's kind of in charge, and sometimes I do assign like a team leader, someone who's a more veteran staffer. It depends on, who's on staff that year. And then the other 2 are in there. Now, sometimes I have 4 if the numbers come out, but I've never had more than 4 in a group. Okay, so week 3 is the design week, and so when they are doing that, they are, sorting through all their photos that were taken the previous week. They are figuring out which mods they want to use, and when they're choosing those mods, they're looking at the spreads that came before. They're looking at the copy style that was used on the most previous spreads. They're trying to make sure they're not being redundant in the book. Certainly they're writing the captions for the photos that they have selected to be used. They're finalizing the collection of ACDs, getting that stuff on there on the spread, so that on Monday of week 4, they're going to do their presentation. So for that, I have the students print out a couple copies of the spread as it is at that moment, and we start the class with it being up on the board, and every kid has a writing utensil. I try to have them use colored pencils that each kid has a different colored pencil, so we kind of know who writes what. And we do glows and grows. And so glows obviously are things that they love about the spread. Grows are things that they feel like could be improved. And so Everybody on staff, including me, kind of looks at it. They look at design-wise, they look at kind of who's covered on the page, they read the text, and they make comments right on the spread, and then that's the kind of the work then that group is they're gonna do, right? If they were missing something, they've got to get that in there. If they realize, oh shoot, that person was on last week's spread, we gotta swap them out, then they know they've got to either do a new interview or get a new photo, that type of thing. So you know, that is a way that we can kind of catch some of those things, and it also creates a little bit of collaboration among the groups who aren't always working together with each other. And then it takes a little bit of pressure off that coverage editor, because then they're not the only person who's like double checking all of that stuff, which can be sometimes a little bit daunting. And then of course the last week is proofing. So by that proofing week, they really shouldn't have much to do, because in that presentation week, they have, you know, they should have caught a lot of the things. So in that proofing week, I will often have those students helping the coverage editor. You know, they will oftentimes do the updating of the board based on who's on their spread, that type of thing. I sometimes will give them tasks if we've got some kind of clerical things. Maybe we're doing a mailing for seniorites or something. So they'll help with that. And then by, you know, Sunday at 9 p.m., at the end of that week, they should be finished, and then they will move on to their next one on Monday. Okay, so then in terms of organization, we've done a couple of different things in terms of content management. So one of our bulletin boards, I just got there are these like hanging folder things. I think elementary school teachers use them a lot. And then we just did a colored folder that has the number of each spread, and then it's literally hanging on the wall. So as students, you know, they have their printouts with the signatures, those go in there. Any of their notes that they take, those go in there. Any photos that they took to show the kids when they're working on their content or their caption interviews, those go in there. So we have a kind of a running list and kind of folder of all the content that went into that spread, so that if we do have to double check something, we can double check it. It's right there on the wall. Students also have started to tape folders to their workstations in the classroom because our workroom tends to get pretty messy and papers end up everywhere because it's sort of organized chaos. So that's kind of helped a lot. So at the end of each class, they just plop their stuff that they were working on in that folder, and then it's right there, right? Because we've sometimes also had custodians who, not, you know, through malice, have thrown away things because they were tidying up, and so that has, you know, been a way that we've sort of nipped that in the bud a little bit, because then they're not leaving their things all around. And then in terms of keeping track of their interviews. So my students are required to record all their interviews because, God bless them, they can't take notes. And so they use Otter, and then they just upload those interviews to their group's folder. And that has been, oh my gosh, that has made life so much easier, because then if a kid's absent, we're not stalled from work, right? Because their stuff's already online. Their group has access. They can just go in and, you know, and update that. And also, groups can kind of hold each other accountable. You know, if someone does an interview and it's a dud and there's no content, their group members are going to say, "That's crap. You need to go. You need to do better, right? Or let me go with you the next time and let me help you, right?" Because then it becomes kind of community property, and then everybody can kind of see it, which has made life a lot easier. Particularly because we use the online program for Herf Jones to create our book, so that way they can have access to all those quotes at home too, and then you don't need to have, you know, the interview notebook of that individual person in order to get the work done. So in terms of the rapport piece, gosh, your life is so much easier if the students get along and that they, you know, respect each other and like each other. Certainly in the summertime, doing the boot camp and going to camp, those things certainly help, but that's not going to be the whole group because not everyone is able to go. But it does kind of start with that. And then, you know, we all do icebreakers, those start. I, in the beginning of each semester, do a lot of mentoring, both for taking photos and also interviewing. And so typically that's a returning staffer and a new staffer, and they just kind of partner up and they go. So typically the editors and returning members, you know, those first 2 weeks of school are really going to a lot of the photo events and basically saying to the rest of the staff, hey, I'm going to be there. You know, I'd love for you to join me. You know, I'm there to help you if you want it. If you don't, that's totally fine. But, you know, we need you to take some photos. And so the best way to do it is to try, and we'll be there to help you if you need it. My students also are really good about kind of group events. So, you know, going to breakfast, you know, grabbing coffee before school, or so my students, I have a homeroom for my staff, and so the yearbook room tends to become a little bit of a breakfast hangout in the morning because of that. And so, you know, they'll invite the other ones in and they'll stop and get donuts and coffee, and, you know, they just kind of hang out, you know, or they'll carpool together to photo events, right? Because the younger kids don't drive yet, and things like that, just to kind of engage them with each other. We've also done for ad sales, kind of team ad sales. And that has helped too, because then they run around the, you know, the community and kind of get to know each other as they do that, but they're also working for that. And that's kind of a side note, but what has worked really well for us for that is on early dismissal days, they go out, because if they work, they don't usually start until later. And if they're in sports, they don't usually start till later because the teachers have meetings in the afternoon. So that's kind of a time when they've been able to go out, and kind of those groups really sort of bond together. And so that has been really good. Of course, we have parties. This year we actually had a girl who had never had a birthday party, and she was turning 16. And I know, sad. And one of the girls heard about it, and she said to me, "Now, Ms. Brown, we can have a party, right?" I said, "Of course we're having a party." So we threw her a surprise party, because that's what you do, right? Listen, and we lost a complete day of productivity, but I didn't care, because that was important, right? And she had a great day, and we had a great day. So, you know, try to find different ways that you can kind of do that. It doesn't have to be a party. So we've also done kind of superstar staffer awards and gold stars. So I have a little sort of jar that if staffers notice people are doing a really good job, they can pop in a little thing like, hey, shout out to this person, and then I'll print out a certificate, right, and we'll hand that out to them. And then if I get enough of them, I'll sometimes attach like a small gift card to Sheets or something, you know, and then we just pull up, you know, a little name out of a hat of anybody who got a superstar staffer, and then, you know, at the end of the marking period, somebody with a small something. And that just, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time, it's not a lot of money, but they like it. They like the accolades for that. Certainly, you know, put as much in any school social media, or, you know, if there's a newsletter that goes out each week, you know, give them the credit, because, you know, with a yearbook, the community doesn't see it really until it delivers. And so they don't really get a sense of all the stuff that everyone's doing. So if you can kind of shout that out throughout the year, that's a really good way to kind of remind the students, yeah, okay, this does matter. You know, you could share photos that are amazing. You could, you know, print half spreads if you want, you know, something to kind of show off what you're doing a little bit. So I said before, I'm pretty competitive. So we had set a goal, you know, to compete at a certain level. But I don't always have competitive groups. I mean, let's be honest, it depends on who they are. So, you know, for us, yeah, we like to compete and do well in those competitions. But at the end of the day, we want people to like the book. And so, you know, kind of setting goals and trying to make improvements is really about that. And we just kind of celebrate when we do those things, whether it be like a big goal that we've set and achieved, or kind of mini milestones of, by this date, we want to have 25% of the student body in the book, right? It can be small things, or this week we want to get 10 new kids on the spread for this week, right? It can be as simple as a small coverage goal, and then you kind of celebrate some of those things. Or if someone takes amazing photos, particularly, one of the new folks who maybe was a little bit shy, right? Praise those kids up and down, right? Because they don't always realize when they've taken a good photo, or have done a really good job, and that has really kind of helped them to build confidence and, really work hard. So I spoke a little bit about goals. So we, as part of that planning process, kind of set goals for the year, kind of short-term, long-term. I'll be honest, we do it better some years than others. If we're really on top of things, we'll do like goal check-ins. We're not always that great. I wish we were. But I feel like the process of setting the goals is a pretty important one. But you've got to be smart about it, right? So you can't take on things that are too much, right? One or two things that are manageable that you can actually do better, and then you can focus on those. You can't fix 8 things in a year. It's impossible. There's no way. And you got to consider the skills. Listen, do I wish I had rock stars every single year and 25 of them? Absolutely. Does that happen? No. So you got to take what you get and do the best that you can. So for us, we pretty much choose kind of 1 or 2 things every year that we want to improve. So I just kind of included that list on here, and you can kind of see. And so really, 2007-8, we were working on captions because they were crap, right? And I wanted storytelling captions that all had a quote in them and that people would care to read, not, Joe Bob Smith eats a hamburger in the cafeteria. Come on now, right? And really the goal is that after 2007-8, our captions are amazing. And then we move on to the next thing, right? And then those things are amazing. We've got that nailed down. And then we move on to the next thing. But you'll also notice we revisited some things, right? We're not perfect, right? So we've done coverage a couple of times, right? And you'll notice last year it was all about group dynamics because, oh God, my 2018-19 group were hellions, really. I mean, they didn't get along. I shouldn't call them hellions, but they didn't get along. There was a lot of backstabbing, like behind the scenes, like social media was a mess, and I couldn't take it. I could not take another year of that. I needed them to actually like each other. So that had to be a priority. And the rest of it would fall into place for that. So, it's by group. Sometimes it's about the book, sometimes it's about how we run the book. But that was always kind of set in place as we kind of move forward. So, this I think you're already doing, right? If you're going to set a goal, you've got to kind of figure out how are you going to be able to manage that. So use your resources. If there are other teachers in the building who know things. So I relied on the graphics teacher to teach my kids how to do cutouts, right? I wasn't knowledgeable in that aspect. I said, hey, Justin, can you do a little mini lesson, type up a little guide for these kids? He was like, yeah, no problem. Totally fine. And again, I'm fortunate that I have an administration who will get him coverage for his class, and they can, he can come in and collaborate with my students for a day. But there are people, I'm sure, in your buildings who would do that as well. Certainly other advisors, your company rep, tech support. So I became a big joiner, right? I mean, I belong to a bunch of different organizations, and I take kids to conventions and things, and you kind of find people who frankly are better than you, and you rely on them, and you kind of pick their brain, and you learn from them, and hopefully foster some relationships through that. And then the last part there is create a library of yearbooks. So I think we probably have 80 yearbooks in our library. And listen, we are not afraid to stock the best of show table at conventions and wait till people don't pick them up. And then we literally like hover over the ones that we want and hope that people don't come and take them. And then we bring home, 8 or 10 of these amazing books. And then we use them as a reference, right? So, I mean, really, when we started this whole process of improvement, we literally dissected one school's book. I mean, to the extent that we were measuring with a Pica ruler the size of their photos to get a sense of the scale of things in the book. I mean, that book is just beat up because it's been opened, it's been, sticky noted, and we did because, if you don't know things, the best way to figure it out is to look at the people who are doing it well. And so always in the first week, that's what my kids are doing. They are in class, they are taking their sticky notes and they're flipping through. And, sometimes it's, find photos that you love. Why do you love them? Or find a story type that you love. Why do you love them? Find a headline, whatever it might be. And then I also have them take them home. It's kind of like homework, and read the text. Because in class, there's not enough time to really do that. It's more kind of the visual. And then that gives them at least a little bit of a foundation of where we're going, because they don't really know when they start what it actually is, because they're not really done it before. Or it's a good refresher for the ones who've done it before, to kind of remember, oh yeah, we've got to consider all these things. So the last piece is some reflection. And so I have my students do self and group reflections. And typically this happens during that proofing week. So, they've got some time, and they will complete the self and group assessments at that point. And so I just put kind of a sample on here. Sometimes it's about your contribution. Sometimes it's about kind of group dynamics. Are there any challenges that you faced in this work session, on this spread? How would you rate your communication as a group? Why or why not? And so the group, when they work on together, and the self one, obviously they do. So it's interesting for me to see, because sometimes I'll see discrepancies, because, some groups function better than others. So sometimes I'll have kids saying things in their self-reflection that don't match the group reflection. And then I know we've got to have a chat, because something's going on, or I'll have the editor, sit down with them and kind of figure out what's going on with that. But it gives them, just kind of a reminder of things, and it forces them to kind of recognize what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. And then typically, if they're not doing something well, I'll have them come up with a practical solution. Okay, great. Your communication, not great this time. How do we improve that? What's one thing you guys can do in this next round to do better, right? And that's what we do for that. So I think that's the end. Yeah. So that's kind of the madness in a nutshell. Any questions?
Hey, Beth Ann.
Hi, Aaron.
So we're also a Herf Jones book, and every year some of my better designers and myself get very frustrated with some of the limitations in edesign.
Mm-hmm.
And every year we threaten to go all InDesign and do all e-pages book.
Yeah.
And I do believe, I think you said that your staff still uses edesign mostly.
Yeah.
That's surprising, I guess. I have a almost entirely new staff this year, and I thought, well, we do the newspaper as well, and all of my newspaper editors use InDesign to create newspaper layout.
Mm-hmm.
So about half of my staff, or at least a third of the staff, is always using InDesign anyways. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on why, if you've found any limitations with eDesign, and what your thoughts are, and or any of your spreads at all are made with InDesign or anything like that.
So when I took over, it was halfway through a school year. I had no idea, and I didn't have a graphics background, so for me it was easier to use the online program, which is why we did it. But honestly, we've always been able to find a fix for anything that eDesign doesn't naturally do. So like the 1 year we wanted a gradient, and so we had a student create it and we imported it and then kind of plopped it in that way. So that's really been our fix, is we will do things in Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign, and then we'll plop it in as an image. And that has worked for us. You know, there really hasn't been anything that we've wanted to do that we couldn't figure out some sort of backdoor fix for.
I think text might be the biggest frustration, because it has the justified text option, but no justified where the last line can be aligned to the left. And so there's a lot more options with your text formatting and InDesign.
And your font choice as well. I mean, that, now that I think about it, that is the one thing I wish we could import fonts into eDesign, but you can't. You've got to use the Hercules. But, you know, they've got a lot, and we've made it work, and, you know, nobody's complained, so I think we're good.
Thank you.
Sure. But honestly, you clearly have more knowledge of InDesign than I do. So for me, it was a comfort level. If you are equipped to do it, because you do have more flexibility to do that. I just, with everything else, wasn't prepared to learn an entirely new program on top of everything else.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Our books come in today. I'm actually in our little podcast studio at the school right now, because the truck will not give me more than a half an hour notice when the shipment arrives and school's actually closed. So I'm just sitting here waiting for UPS.
How are you doing distribution then?
So all summer most of the summer, we done this meal distribution on campus with the cafeteria staff, and I'd volunteered with that. So we're modeling it sort of after that. So once the books come in, I'm going to let my staff know, and then the ones that can make it will make it. And we're going to do a curbside pickup, masks, gloves, just to be, no, that way nobody can say that we're not taking anything seriously.
Sure.
And then we have enough extras. Some people, I'm sure, will try to buy when they get here, but we actually sold a few more books this year than I thought we would, than we had in a couple years past. So I'm hoping that we're doing it today. The truck will be here by 2, and we're doing distribution from 4 to 6 right in front of the school, and for the next 3 days. So hopefully the third day will just be the last minute stragglers. But we also usually have like clubs and people that want to donate books to students that have financial needs, especially seniors. So our rep is going to pick those books up and mail them directly to those students' houses, because usually those just get delivered by the guidance department, kind of as a surprise. So we'll see how it goes. This will be interesting.
Okay. Good luck.
How about, is yours all taken care of yet, or?
No, we don't get our books until August. So.
Oh, okay. It's a fall release.
Well, no, but that's when our book is coming. So we're just, in limbo. It's totally fine. I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, parents are like, well, when are we getting them? In August. Like, calm down.
Yeah.
True.
But I'm thinking, because we solicited donations to try to get every senior to have a book this year, just because, they got ripped off. So they obviously don't all know that at this point. And a lot of them, unfortunately, have turned off all communication from the district, which I didn't realize was a thing, but they did. So I think what's going to happen for us is we'll distribute probably in a similar fashion as you are. But then any senior who didn't pick it up, I think we'll mail it to them. Underclassmen, I'm not worried about that. They can get it in the fall if they need to. But I think for the seniors, we'll mail it to the address on record. And then that's kind of like the surprise, that they'll get for that. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I very much, have a very blasé attitude about it because so much is out of our control at this point. You know, when Herb Jones says, well, how about the first week of August? Okay, you know, what am I going to do? Fight them?
Yeah.
No, it's fine. We'll make it work. So I hope it all goes well for you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for this.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Got something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, this was really awesome. It was really informational, and it talked about a lot of stuff that I had no idea about.
Oh,
Actually, no idea about.
awesome.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right. I guess we're good for today. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah,
That's
have a
it.
great day.